Welcome in, ladies and gentlemen, to the Rapid Rundown presented by the Fantasy Facts with Fantasy Data, bringing you all the numbers, all the projections, injury news, updates, and sit start advice, all for the entire slate of Week 10 starting right now. Let's jump right into it. If you do not have a fantasy data subscription yet, you need to go get yourself one. Use the promo code FAQS, that's FAQS, at fantasydata.com. Get yourself 20% off a subscription, which gets you all of the data that I use right here. You can export it all out into CSVs. It's a beautiful thing. It gives you projections, it gives you stats, it gives you advanced stats, efficiency stats, all that you can ask for and more. Definitely check it out. It's what's given me my edge making all of my playoff runs. So, jumping straight into it, we got a Thursday night game that is probably going to be a bit of another borer with the Atlanta Falcons traveling to Carolina to take on the Panthers. This is one of the lower over unders of the week at 42 and a half, with both teams implied totals only being at 20 and 22 and a half. It's a pretty close spread. I actually kind of like Atlanta to pull this one out against Carolina, but some news. One, the Falcons, they look like they're all back and healthy. Cordell Patterson is back. There's a couple of people that are listed out on the defensive side of the ball, but nobody to really pay attention to in terms of fantasy. The Panthers on the other side, no Rashard Higgins, which really isn't that big of a blow. And then everybody else is pretty much back into it. There's nobody in terms of fantasy relevant except for one guy, and that is Chuba Hubbard, who was a full participant in the last practice and is questionable to go tonight. Something you want to keep in mind for not only Hubbard, because Hubbard had a pretty good game in the past, but also for Foreman. Foreman has been aside from this past week, has been doing pretty well for the Panthers after the CMC trade. I like starting Hubbard in this matchup. I think he has a pretty good shot to be able to shred this Falcons defense on the ground once again. In terms of fantasy projections, he is the third highest on this Atlanta team, right behind DJ Moore at 12 and PJ Walker at 11. Foreman comes in at 11.59, right behind Walker's 0.77. So I like Foreman. I like his opportunity here. I think he definitely has a shot to put up some decent fantasy numbers. I don't like PJ Walker. I don't like DJ Moore. They stand the best shot to have a good game outside of Foreman. Terrace Marshall has been a sneaky play because of volume, but again, this offense is just not an offense that you want to invest a lot of fantasy roster spots in, regardless of what kind of format you're playing in, because they can be pretty bad at times. And Walker was sat at halftime because he played so bad, and then was able to uh, be named the starter for tonight. How long is that leash? It'll be really hard to tell. On the Atlanta side of the ball, um, like I said, Cordell Patterson is back. That is great news, and he came back in a great way. I expect him to be again startable. The Carolina defense has been decent at times, but then has been shredded at times. So it'll be interesting to see whether or not Atlanta can take advantage of that as they go along. But I like Patterson. Mariota, of course, is the highest projected as a quarterback, but I really don't like him, even in a matchup that could be good, which makes me down on Pitts again, makes me down on London again, just because it's hard to be able to trust these guys. It has been hard the entire season to be able to trust them. Hopefully, we see an offense start putting things together, especially at this point in the season. But there's not much to give you confidence in starting a Kyle Pitts and starting a Drake London. Tyler Algier had a decent game, but I would not expect him to be able to keep that. We'll need to see what the split is between Patterson and Algier as things move forward. I'm putting Patterson in my lineups, and then I have to make the tough call with Pitts. I feel like everybody needs to make the tough call with Pitts. Unless you have another option that is a quality tight end, it's really, really difficult to sit Pitts, but I don't blame you if you do. I know in my leagues, he's not an auto start for me. It is a who else do I have that I can play him? And I think Pitts is going to stay in that position of you can't drop them, you can't start them, you can't put them on your bench. You really can't do anything with them, and it makes you so frustrated. I know I've been in that position all season long with them. I do not like Kyle Pitts. And until we get more out of him, it does look like he should have a stretch of good games coming up, but right now it is not. It's not start. He's not startable. He's not an auto start for me. Not really anybody in this Thursday night game is an auto start for me. So take that as what it will be for you. All right, moving on to the next game of the week. We have Seattle traveling to Tampa Bay, going from the rainy Northeast to hopefully the sunshine state in Tampa. We have some fantasy ballers in this game. It's a pretty average over under at 44 and a half, really not that far away from the Atlanta Carolina game. And the spread is the same as the Atlanta Carolina game, with Tampa Bay only giving up 2.5 points. This is a game that I'm excited to see. It is a Sunday morning game, so keep that in mind. It is a Sunday morning game. It'll start at 9:30 Eastern time. If you're on the West Coast, you really, really want to make sure you've set those lineups ahead of time. If there's any questionable guys that are out there, you want to make sure that you're prepared with a game plan, either dropping them out of your lineup Saturday night based on reports, or setting your alarm for 6 in the morning to be able to go ahead and make those changes, because there are some guys that you want to keep an eye on. Lockett was a full participant, but Marquise Goodwin wasn't. DK Metcalf was a full participant. That's really your big names on the Seattle side of the ball. It looks like we're not going to have any concern with your startable guys. Marquise Goodwin really isn't that. But Lockett and DK, they should be good to go with the fact that they logged full practices. On the other side of the ball, you have Julio Jones, who did not practice. You had Mike Evans, who was a limited participant. And you have Russell Gage, who also did not practice. Those are the ones that you really want to get as close of a feel for as you can on Saturday night, especially if you're on the West Coast, living on the East Coast. My kids wake me up at like 6 in the morning. So I do have a little bit more time to make sure I get the updated injury information there. If Mike Evans is good to go, this is definitely a matchup where we could see him excel. Chris Godwin, same thing. This could be Brady came all the way back with almost 60 pass attempts this past week. I don't see that happening again, but I think Tampa Bay started realizing, like, hey, we're not winning the battle at the line of scrimmage. We can't just turn around and hand the ball off to Fournette. We need to take advantage of the fact that we have one of the greatest, if not the greatest, we're not getting into that argument, quarterbacks of all time in Tom Brady. Even though he may be, old as the sand in the hourglass, we still need to put the ball in his hand and let him sling the ball around. So it could be a game for Mike Evans and Chris Godwin. Cade Otton has been popping off as a tight end. This is one of those situations where, man, do you play Cade Otton? Maybe. Do you play him over a guy like Kyle Pitts? I kind of don't think so, because Kyle Pitts is, well, Kyle Pitts, even though Cade Otton has really been coming on. Lenny Fournette is projected at 14.87 points. This scares me. I do not like him quite that high. And part of it is the Rashad White. I'm not buying into the rumor mill just yet of Rashad White taking over touches from Fournette, but the fact that they've both been rather inconsistent is what really scares me with both of these guys. But Evans, Godwin, those guys, lock them into your lineup. Evans, though, make sure you check on the injury for him. On the Seattle side of the ball, Gino has been making a very, very strong case for him being a QB1 in a one quarterback league. Go ahead. I'm starting him without much reservation. Kenneth Walker has ran his way into being an RB start every week. Granted, it depends on who else you got, but really, if you got Kenny Walker, he's probably going to be in your lineup in some way, shape, or form. And then both Lockett and Metcalf are startable players that you're going to have in your lineup, pretty much regardless of who else you have in there. But this is a good matchup. I feel like this could be it could be a higher scoring affair than what Vegas is putting it out to at 44.5. I don't trust any of the tight ends in Seattle, even though they do get involved. I don't trust them. I'd much rather play like a Cade Otton over either of them, even though it does look like Cameron Brate is going to come back and be healthy. Cade Otton seems to be kind of establishing himself there, but I would still kind of put like a Kyle Pitts and Kyle Pitts' upside in my lineup over any of these tight end options. Again, depending on what you need in your lineup, most of the time, if you're trying to make a playoff run right now, you need the upside, which means you're kind of forced into the hand of playing Kyle Pitts over those guys, and that's going to be my last Kyle Pitts comment. I promise. Maybe I don't know. We'll see what happens. All right, moving on to the next game. This could be the game of the week and also is the one that you want to pay attention to in injury news the most, and that is Minnesota traveling to the Buffalo Bills. If you have been, I guess, living under a fantasy football rock, you may not know that Josh Allen tweaked his elbow, losing to the Jets, which who saw that one coming? All my Jets fans at home, kudos to you guys for a phenomenal win. That defense looks great. But Josh Allen, you want to definitely keep in mind what his practice is looking like as the weekend progresses. If he is good to go, he's in your lineup. You're not, unless you got Mahomes and Allen, you're not swapping out, or maybe Jalen Hurts, you're not swapping out Allen for really anybody else in this quarterback field of play, right? So definitely keep an eye on Josh Allen. Outside of that, there's not really anyone else to keep mind of in terms of fantasy relevant injuries going on right now. The Bills have a whole plethora of injuries out there, but most of them are on the defensive side of the ball, which could mean good things for the 7-1 Vikings. Adam Thielen is a limited participant, but really you're starting Justin Jefferson. You're probably starting Captain Kirk in a streamable QB type of situation, definitely in a super flex, and you're definitely rolling out Dalvin Cook. I would be rolling out TJ Hawkinson as well. I think those are really the only options that you have on the Minnesota side of the ball in terms of guys that you're rolling out there. I do want to see this Buffalo Bills defense get healthy. They're not there yet. I do want to see that happen, but with all of the limited and did not participate in the Bills secondary line of scrimmage, there's going to be opportunities for the Vikings to take advantage. So despite the Bills defense being a very good defense when healthy, it's not stopping me from starting your main guys on this Minnesota offense. I'm not reaching into the bag and trying to play like a KJ Osborne. I really don't want to play Thielen. There's a possibility that he gets involved a little bit here, but again, I don't want to have to play Thielen if I have other options out there. And you're not reaching for like an Alexander Madison or anything like that. As long as Cook is healthy, Madison's pretty firmly on the bench in real life and should be on the bench in any fantasy type of lineups. For the Bills, like I said, if Josh Allen is healthy, he's an auto go. Make sure you get him in there. Stephon Diggs, he's an auto go. Make sure you get him in there. And I would say, and I know people are against it, but Singletary again is another flexible option here. People wanted Nyheim Hines to come in and be that dude, and he just wasn't. He had one target last week that could be him being worked into the offense. Yes, it absolutely could be that, but I do not see this takeover, this Naeem Hines is going to win people fantasy championships. Yes, that was all over Twitter when the trade was happening. I don't see that being a thing, and I'm not wavering from. I'm not saying Devin Singletary is going to be, an RB1 or an RB2, but he is a flexible dude right now. You keep him involved in the game, and anybody that is a running back for the Bills that is involved in the game gets an opportunity as the Bills move the ball down the field and get into scoring position. Granted, if Case Keenum is the starter, all of those guys take a little bit of a hit, because let's face it, nobody else is Josh Allen, and Case Keenum is a very far distance between him and being anything like Josh Allen. Gabe Davis becomes a flex option. He has been very hit or miss this season, with a lot more misses than hits so far. And Isaiah McKenzie, you're probably not starting him unless you need to. Same thing with Dawson Knox. There's other tight end opportunities out there where I don't think you should feel like you have to play a guy like Dawson Knox. If Case Keenum comes in, um, I'd have to go back and reevaluate that, because there is the backup quarterbacks throw to the tight end a lot more because they can't. They're not as used to seeing the whole field. But I think the entire offense just takes such a hit that what you're hoping for with Dawson Knox is a touchdown reception for him, and I don't see that happening with Case Keenum. But we'll come back to that as we get more injury news and notes for them. Moving on to the next game, which again, could just be a fun game. I'm not going to lie. It really could just end up being a fun game based on how these two teams have played, and that's Detroit and Chicago. The Lions and Bears, the Lions through the beginning, I think it was the beginning 6 weeks of the season, were one of the top scoring offenses in the league. They had like so many 30-point games. And Chicago is just coming off of just back-to-back games where Justin Fields has really come into what fantasy people wanted him to be. The big question is going to be, can he continue it? I would say against the Lions, yes, he absolutely can continue it against the Lions. Can he continue it for the rest of the season? We'll see. I like what he's been doing now. Can you expect him to have 175 rushing yards again? No. Can you expect him to have 100 rushing yards? Absolutely. Can he maybe find another deep pass to one of those wide receivers? Possibly, right? And with Chase Claypool coming in, maybe we see a little bit more of that as well. We get a little bit more vertical routes. We see Justin Fields be able to throw that deep ball, which he does have a good deep ball. We get to see him throw that a bit more. So Justin Fields, he is a start. Again, in almost any format, especially against this Lions defense. The big question is David Montgomery and Khalil Herbert. The split of this backfield has been extremely frustrating. I am probably going to have to flex them. You're probably going to have to flex them if you own them. But again, this is against the Lions. You should be able to feel more confident playing them because the Lions' run defense is not that good. But this could end up being one of those games where Justin Fields picks up all the rushing yards and Monty just has a meh type of game. Khalil Herbert, it is all determinant on his amount of volume. When he gets the ball, he looks good with it, but he doesn't get the ball enough to be a fantasy stud, a fantasy reliable starter for you, even in a flex type of position. But again, depending on what type of running back situation you're in, you may be in a situation where you have to roll those guys out. And you're hoping that the Lions' lack of a run defense is what keeps you afloat. Mooney and Claypool, again, these are high upside flex guys. They are not guys that if I'm in a 2 wide receiver league or even a 3 wide receiver league, I don't want them necessarily in that starting spot. I would much rather want a more consistent option there, especially knowing that Fields' fantasy points comes from his legs, not through the air. So I don't mind having them in there as options because all you need is one big deep throw to just save your fantasy week. but again, I don't want them in necessarily my starting lineup. Cole Kmet, though, becomes one of the more interesting plays as he's been starting to find the end zone. So Cole Kmet, again, against this Lions defense, now becomes a much more viable option. The Bears should be able to get the ball into the Lions 20, which gives them that versatility with Cole Kmet to maybe find the end zone again this week. I like that as an option. I like Cole Kmet being a streamable tight end for you if you're not lucky enough to have, the Kelseys and the Mark Andrews, assuming he's healthy, guys like that. On the Detroit side of the ball, again, big question mark here comes down to health with Swift. Is Swift going to be on a pitch count again? Yes, no, maybe. It's going to be super duper hard to tell whether or not that's going to happen. Um, Again, I'm not. I want to be able to play Swift because when he's on the field, he does look good. It does look like he will play. Yes, I see you in there, Nick. I apologize. I totally doing this solo. Haven't looked at the comments until just now. My apologies. I'm going to start throwing some of them in there. Yes, Swift does look like he's going to play. The question is what type of pitch count he's going to be on. For the past couple of weeks, that's what it's been. That's why I don't mind starting Jamal Williams. One, he gets a lot of work. He gets the work at the goal line from what we've seen so far. And again, this Bears defense, Bears and Lions defense, they're not very good against the run. So we should be able to see some rushing opportunities for them. I don't mind putting Swift in the flex if you have him. And I'm okay with that. But again, be prepared for a letdown if he ends up on this pitch count again. Goff is a flex, not a flex, like a super flexible type of guy, and maybe a late streamer option if you have it. Amon-Ra St. Brown has had a bunch of letdown weeks lately. This is a game that we could see him kind of come back in. And yes, that's probably due to his ankle injury. But hopefully we see him starting to fully recover from that and get back to himself because it was a lot of fun watching him play earlier on in the season. And then outside of that, there's not really much that I would say go out and get. I'm not promoting Khalifa Raymond. I'm not promoting Josh Reynolds or anybody like that. All right. We'll skip ahead to the Dallas Green Bay game because we do have some questions coming in about that. I mean, I'm rocking my Cowboys hat. I totally think that the Cowboys are going to win this game. I think the Green Bay offense is just defunct at this point. And so the question that came in was drop Dylan, get Jeff Wilson. And actually, the original question was, good morning, would you drop A.J. Dillon or DeAndre Swift for Jeff Wilson, Kenneth Gainwell, or Darrell Henderson, or Caleb Huntley, non-PPR? Oh, man, that is a great question. And I would say I wouldn't drop A.J. Dillon right now. One, because the question mark around Aaron Jones. Aaron Jones looks like he is healthy. It looks like the reports are coming in negative about his high ankle sprain. Let me take a quick look to see what his latest practice participation has been. And he was a limited participant, which to me, a limited participant here looks like he's going to be able to get out there and play. So I would be more inclined to trade away AJ Dillon or drop AJ Dillon over Swift. One, because Swift has the greater upside, in my opinion, if he can get on the field and he gets past that pitch count that I was just talking about in the last game. AJ Dillon, the whole Green Bay offense looks, like I said, absolutely defunct. And starting with that offensive line, I was able to go to the Jets-Packers game in Lambeau. By the way, beautiful. Love Lambeau. People out there, absolutely wonderful. Not trying to poo on the Packers fans. They were great. Just the Packers team, not so good. That offensive line is just not creating anything for for this team to be able to start plays around, which is why I don't like Aaron Rodgers. He's in a streamable conversation and one that I'm not excited about, especially against this Cowboys defense that is really coming into their own and has a lot of solid parts, not just Micah Parsons, but a lot of solid parts all around that defense. So I do not like Aaron Rodgers this week. I don't mind Alan Lazard in your lineup. I don't mind Aaron Jones if the news comes out that he's going to be good to go. And Robert Tanyan, again, just the way this offense is going, I don't feel confident putting him into any lineups um, that I feel like I would need production out of my tight end. On the Cowboys side of the ball, Dak Prescott is a go. CeeDee Lamb is a go. It'll be really, really interesting to see what happens with this Cowboys backfield. Zeke looks like he is back and is going to play. Whether or not we see the Pollard emergence here is going to be the big question. Okay. And and the Jerry Jones, I don't care if we need to wheel Zeke out in a stretcher, he's still gonna play. Type of mentality seems like it's still in there. It seems like Zeke is going to be on the field. If Zeke is on the field, both of these guys become flex-ish guys, Pollard and Zeke. Pollard definitely gets a little bit of upside here because he is the more explosive guy, but Zeke has definitely been the consistent guy. If you need 10 points, Zeke is that guy. He's going to get you 10 points. He's not going to get you a 20 plus game, but he's going to get you 10 points. There's a lot of consistency with Zeke, at least historically. That's what we have. Pollard gives you that upside, though. Like we saw, Pollard got all the touches last week, and he looked absolutely phenomenal with all of those touches. Again, biggest concern is what that split is going to look like here. And so, again, until we know a little bit more, they're both flexible options. With Pollard giving you the upside flex and Zeke giving you the safe floor flex. I really like Dalton Schultz in this matchup as well. And I'm not leaning so much on Gallup or Noah Brown or anybody else in that pass catching group. To me, it's CeeDee Lamb and Dalton Schultz, who are the guys that are going to be the major pass catchers for the Cowboys. And I don't really want to play like the Gallups or Noah Brown or anybody else really in that mix. All right, let's go back to the 1 o'clock games. We have Denver traveling to Tennessee. This could be the snooze fest of the week, which means that'll be the one they're locked into on Red Zone. I don't know why. I just feel like that's always what happens to me. But this could be the lowest total of the season at only 37 points. Neither of these teams, in terms of implied odds, are expected to top 20 points because the spread is only 2.5. I like Derrick Henry. How do you not like Derrick Henry? He's going to be an absolute stud here. Robert Tannehill. It could be. Did I say Ryan? Ryan or Robert? Ryan Tannehill should be good to go. It looks like he had another limited practice, so it looks like he should be the one to go here. And Malik Willis just hasn't been that phenomenal, but Derrick Henry, you're rolling him out because it doesn't take a whole lot to turn around and hand the ball off to the big man running move in that line, moving people. Tennessee should have had a win against Kansas City. Yes, a lot of shoulda, woulda, couldas, but the fact that it ends in a controversial play really just kind of like, oh man, that's tough for Tennessee. Tennessee, I think, comes out and they trounce Denver. Being able to be at home, I think they trounce Denver, and it's all on the legs of Derrick Henry. I don't like Tannehill. I don't like Woods. I don't like Hillard. I don't like Hooper. I don't like Westbrook, Keene. There's just so much to not like there. The one thing looking forward though is Treylon Burks. He is past the 4 weeks that he needs to be on IR. It'll be very interesting to see how they incorporate him in. Keep an eye on that. He may be worth a little bit of a stash, just because he was looking pretty good in the beginning of the season. And this offense is desperate for somebody to catch the ball. Um, on the other side, Denver, Wilson has been almost unstartable this entire week. You have Judy and Sutton, and that plays in nicely to the comment here. Mattis, sorry if I'm butchering that. I probably am. My apologies. But good morning. Would you trade Jonathan Taylor for Jamar Chase? Standard leave have Barkley, ETN, Damian Peace, Patterson, Jeff Wilson at RB. I mean, it kind of depends on who your other options are there. I thought I saw it. Oh, that's Nick saying he loves Jerry Judy in this one. Yeah, I like Judy in this one as well. And I like Sutton. Outside of that, there's not really much to go in this Denver game. Back to Matt here. Um, yeah, I mean, if you can pull off a Jonathan Taylor for Jamar Chase trade, I really don't mind it, especially because you have the depth in your running back room to make that happen. Assuming you're starting two running backs, you're going to be starting Barkley and ETN right off the bat there. I really like what they have going for him, and Damian Pierce is a great flex. And Wilson looks like he's coming into his own in this Miami backfield. Granted, it's been one game, but he looked decent, and that passing attack makes everybody running the ball look a little bit more decent in there as well. All right. And we already talked about this one, so I'll throw this one in here real quick and then we'll jump into the next game. Pollard or DJ Moore? Great question. It depends on kind of what you're looking for in this one. If you're looking for upside or consistency, I think volume wise, DJ Moore, and really it's consistent is so difficult to say with DJ Moore. Ugh, it tastes bad in my mouth even saying it. But I think DJ Moore being the one of the main options, if not the main option in this Panthers offense, gives him at least the volume he needs in order to be a worthwhile start here. It should give him the volume to be somewhat of a reliable play. Tony Pollard, if you're looking for upside, Tony Pollard has all of the upside in this situation. I like Tony Pollard, especially if Zeke has any type of like setback getting ready for the game here. Yes, it looks like Zeke's going to play, but Tony Pollard is the upside play here. And worst case scenario, both of them dud out on you and they end up kind of evening each other out. So I would say Pollard is probably where I would go more times than not in this situation, between Pollard and Moore. And absolutely, Matt, thank you. Feel free to jump in. That's why we do this. Jump in. Be able to have these conversations. All right. Moving on to the next game. We have, where do we leave off? We have Jacksonville traveling to Kansas City. This is the second largest spread of the week. This week, there's only two big spreads this week, and only really one big over under, and it barely gets to that threshold of a 50-point over under. And that is this game right here. Again, with almost all of it on the side of Kansas City, which you would assume being quarterbacked by the one and only Patrick Mahomes, who obviously is an auto start. Kelsey is an auto start. Juju's making his case for being an auto start as well. And I don't mind throwing him into the lineups and keeping him in that place. I especially in DFS, this is a game to target if you want to go slightly non-chalky. If you want to throw in an MVS, if you want to throw in a Mecole Hardman, if you want to throw in a Kadarius Toney, because all of those guys have opportunities here to be able to jump in and get into the end zone, because that's what happens with KC. It happened this past week with Mecole Hardman having the first touchdown score for KC. The running backs, again, is just a black hole. I'm not touching any of these running backs. I don't mind stashing a guy like Pacheco. I don't mind stashing a guy like McKinnon. But all in all, these are running backs that I'm perfectly fine not having them on any of my rosters because their usage is just so all over the place, and it looks like the number one, the presumed number one guy earlier on in the season, is just essentially done. He's not done, but he's not performing, and he's not providing any fantasy points. He's not providing any benefits on the offensive side of the ball either. So I'm okay with having, if I have the roster spot, having a guy like Pacheco on the roster, maybe a guy like McKinnon. But I'm okay with trying to ship these guys out for whatever you can at this point. Um, uh, and that's basically it. For the KC side, you have your studs, you're playing them, roll those guys out, get them in. On the Jacksonville side of the ball, like I said, Travis Etienne, he's a guy that I was skeptical about, but he's really coming in. The James Robinson trade really opened the door for him to be that dude, and he's living that life. So roll him out there as much as you can. Trevor Lawrence is a decent little play here and a sneaky option as a streamable quarterback against a KC defense that can be beaten, which also makes Christian Kirk a nice little play, and Zay Jones also a nice ish little play depending on what your roster looks like. I like Zay Jones as an option, and also Evan Ingram has been able to kind of do some things, which again, living in New York, yeah, I know a Cowboys fan in New York is a bit strange, but having lived in New York my entire life, the Giants fans just watching him just drop pass after pass after pass was incredibly difficult to watch happen. But he seems to have been right in the ship a little bit, and he seems to have a little bit of connection with Trevor Lawrence. Again, could be a sneaky play in this week. Again, depending on who you have out there. Obviously, I'm not saying like start Evan Ingram over a guy like Kelsey. That would be completely asinine. But again, if we went back to like the Seattle tight ends, or if you have like Kate Otten, or maybe you were like me in a couple leagues and you had Hayden Hurst, who is out on bye with Cincy, which should have ran down through all the buys a little bit earlier, but we'll do that in a minute. Throwing a guy like Evan Ingram in can help you kind of maintain a little bit of production at that tight end role. So before we move to the next game, we'll just throw out the buys. Baltimore's on bye. No Lamar Jackson. No Mark Andrews. Hopefully he comes back healthy. No Isaiah Likely if you got that little play in there. Cincy is on bye. No Burrow, no Chase, no Higgins, no Mixon after his 5 touchdown game. New England also on bye. No Ramondre Stevenson. No Jacoby Myers. Not really a ton there. The winning New York Jets on by Michael Carter has been a nice little running back play. So if you need a couple options there, definitely we'll talk about a few more here. But Garrett Wilson, other than that, not a whole lot to talk about with the Jets offense, kind of like the New England one. All right, let's try and speed this up just a little bit. We're a little bit behind time, but that is not an issue. We're going to Cleveland at Miami, the next game up. This is going to be a fun game here, I feel like, because we have a Miami offense that has been really just moving things along and making things happen. Tua is an outside candidate right now for MVP. No, he is not in the top tier group, but he is on that conversation. He's on the tertiary piece of it and should be because of the way that he's been playing. And that's on the legs and hands of guys like Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle. They are auto starts. Yes, there's a little bit of who's going to be the guy that takes off in a certain game, but they've been able to feast enough where both of them have had games where both of them have been fantasy relevant, which is a great thing to see happen for especially a lot of your fantasy teams. Again, another question here at the running back position is the Mostert versus Wilson setup. Like I said, Mostert is the starter, but Wilson's starting to find himself a nice little niche to grow in. And we got a question from Shaka here. Should I trade away Walker and Gabe Davis for Waddle, Monty, and Connor in PPR? Waddle is Waddle and Walker are the two big pieces of this trade here. And this becomes a what do you need type of situation. Honestly, if you are desperate for a wide receiver, trading away Walker and Gabe to get Waddle sounds pretty good. I would really want to know what you're doing to your running back depth in order to make that happen, though. Because, like I said, Waddle's doing just fine in this Miami offense. I expect him to keep making that happen. But if you're trading away Walker and Walker was your number one back, you're not replacing that with Monty and Connor. If Walker was your number two back, you're probably not replacing that with Monty and Connor. So it really depends on what other running backs you have there that can keep you moving along. If you have Saquon, Derrick Henry, but your wide receivers are, uh, Christian Kirk, whoever else, mediocre wide receiver, and you need a top guy, it may be worth making a deal like that. You have Barkley and Jacobs. Makes it a little bit better. It definitely does. I would say look one more time at your roster before making this deal. Look one more time at your roster and say, who am I going to be starting over the next few weeks? What does my roster look like over the next few weeks? Barkley and Jacobs become those guys. A nice little setup because Jacobs has already had his bye, and I have to check. I think the Giants have the Giants already had their bye yet? I'm not sure. I'd have to double check when the Giants buy was. But take a look, see what you have going on, see who you're going to be able to put into those spots. And then do the same thing with your wide receivers, right? Who are your wide receivers? Does Waddle change that enough for you to be able to go, yes, this makes sense for me to give up? And I'm again assuming this is redraft, give up a guy like Walker to be able to do that. The more I talk about it, the more I'm starting to lean Walker and Gabe Davis because of the upside that Gabe also presents to you. But again, he, like I said earlier, talking about the Bills, that upside boom bust type of thing has been a lot more bust for Gabe than it's been boom. But I would say again, if you need that wide receiver position, I don't think this is a terrible trade because you are getting a little bit of running back depth back. Hopefully, Connor comes back. Monty is not a guy that he's not a trade target for me. But if you're able to get Waddle and Connor, and both of those guys can be guys that can be worked into your lineup for Walker and Gabe, I don't mind that as an option moving forward. And again, you get a little bit of depth with Monty in case, knock on wood, hopefully it doesn't happen. You end up with any type of running back issues there moving forward. All right. Yeah, no problems, man. Appreciate you jumping in and throwing a comment in there. All right, moving on to Cleveland. I didn't talk about Cleveland yet. Chubb's been phenomenal. Get Chubb into your lineups. The Miami defense is one that's been able to be beaten, even with the trade line addition of Bradley Chubb, which throws out the possibility here of Jacoby Brissett, Amari Cooper, and Donovan Peoples-Jones having an okay fantasy game this week. Their projections are a little bit low. This could be one of those situations where they end up finishing over projection. Again, depending on what you have on your roster, but there's some opportunity here to work these guys in at a much cheaper cost. If you're doing like a DFS or if the waiver wire is completely picked over and you need a guy, Donovan Peoples-Jones may be an option because Amari Cooper is not going to be on your waiver wires out there. But other than that, it's really the Nick Chubb show. All right, moving right along, let's get to Houston and the New York Giants. The G-men have been surprising a ton of people out here. Saquon Barkley is an auto start if you have him. Daniel Jones becomes a nice little start here because of what he can do on the ground as well as in the air against a team like Houston that just can't really do a ton. So Daniel Jones, a decent streamable option here. Wandell Robinson becomes an option, and I'm going to throw this out there. Darius Slayton, he's a guy that I've enjoyed for a long time. Darius Slayton is a guy that I think is starting again to find his role in this Giants offense, and he looks to be taking over as at least the number two in this offense. And for I think it's 2 weeks now, he's been the leader in terms of targets. And granted, this receiving core is not one to hang your hat on. It is, far and away from like a wide receiver core like the Bengals have, where they're just stacked 3 times over at the position. You're not getting that with this team. But I would say Darius Slayton, he's a guy worth kind of throwing out there as an option. On the Houston side of the ball, Damian Pierce, you're rolling him out there if you have him. I really like Damian Pierce. There was a quick questionable tag that got thrown on him. Make sure you go out and check that. But it doesn't sound like it's anything severe yet. So definitely keep an eye on that if you have Pierce. Davis Mills is probably not going to be an option for you in this matchup. The Giants defense has been uh, they've been a scrappy defense, so one that can cause turnovers also. So I would keep an eye on, like Davis Mills is an option here. I don't like it. I don't want to have to roll him out unless I absolutely need to. Brandon Cooks, you want to check health. Nico Collins, you want to check health. And then other than that, like if they can't go, Chris Moore served decently. It could be the type of thing where we see him kind of become a volume type of play. But again, there's not really much I want to play in this Houston offense. All right, moving on next to New Orleans and Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh needs to get some things together. Hopefully, they did that over their bye this past week. Kenny Pickett is not a startable guy for the foreseeable future. I don't want him in my lineups. I would honestly, despite the projection, I would rather have a guy like Davis Mills in my lineup over a guy like Kenny Pickett in a matchup like this. Deontay Johnson is a volume guy. He's always been a volume guy, but he's just not getting the efficiency he needs to be an auto start. He is a guy that if you have him, you're probably working him into your lineup, though. Again, just because of that level of volume. George Pickens, he's one of those guys who you never quite know what you're going to get out of him. But he has been making a case for himself, and with Chase Claypool being shipped off, we should see a little bit step forward for George Pickens. I don't want to push him into a starting position yet, but I do think he could work his way there really, really soon. Pat Fryermuth is another guy as a tight end option. Don't mind him. I don't mind working him into a position here. And the biggest question is Najee Harris. He's been bad. That I don't want to sugarcoat it. He's been bad, and he's been bad to the point of almost unstartable. And that's the key thing that I want to see if Pittsburgh is figured out. So Najee Harris, you're not cutting him. Najee Harris and Pitts are in the same conversation of the biggest busts of the season because you can't start them with any confidence. You can't leave them on your bench because you're afraid of what kind of blow up game they could have. You can't trade them because, again, you're afraid of what they're going to be after you trade them. And you're not going to get the type of value that you spent on getting them. They're just in this like a limbo state where you can't do anything with them, which essentially just means they're burning a roster spot if you have them on your team because you can't do anything with them. And hopefully Pittsburgh has figured this out. Yes, their offensive line was bad, but their offensive line was bad last year. And Najee Harris had a fine season, mostly propped up just from volume. What are we going to see with Najee moving forward? So again, hopefully Pittsburgh figures it out a little bit. But I don't want to force anything in the foreseeable future. On the other side, Alvin Kamara is one you are forcing him into your lineup, and you're doing it quite quite easily. Chris Olave is another one. You are forcing him into your lineup because he looks like an absolute stud. Andy Dalton, not so much. Not a stud, but has plenty of upside, especially with a guy like Olave. It looks like Landry's getting healthy. And then Taysom Hill is, again, one of those tight end situations where you never quite know what you're going to get with Taysom Hill. I don't like him for any type of floor play that you want to do with a tight end, but he is a guy that gives you plenty of upside. So he becomes a guy that you can work into your lineups. So I don't mind Taysom Hill. If it comes down to like Taysom Hill or Pat Fryermuth, depends on what I need out of that week. If I'm sitting at 7-1 and I'm projected to beat the team that I'm playing against by 50 points, I'm just gonna roll out Pat Fryermuth and just hope I get like a nice little floor of 6, 7, 8 points. If I'm 3-5 and I'm projected to lose to that 7-1 team by 30, 40 points, I'm going to throw Taysom Hill in there because he has the potential to put up a 30-point game that a lot of other tight ends don't have. So it depends on where you are on what type of roster construction you're going to end up with, especially as we keep making these playoff pushes. Next up, moving into the 4 o'clock games, we have the Colts against the Las Vegas Raiders. Raiders at home, getting 6 points over and under. Again, another low one. This one and the past two have all been 40, 42 points. The over under is definitely not one where you want to try and target this game. I am going to throw this out there though. I am putting $5. Not much. I don't do a whole lot of gambling. I do a lot of gambling, but not for a lot of money. I'm putting $5 on the Colts to win this game to cover the spread. I might even double that up to $10 to cover this spread. One, I do not think that the Las Vegas Raiders are a team that just instills fear in people's mind. And two, I think that if the players are getting behind Jeff Saturday, based on the press conferences from Jeff Saturday, I would say if I were in that locker room, I would get behind a coach like that. I think he can kind of invigorate them. If Jonathan Taylor is healthy, also this becomes a game where I'm hopeful to be able to take the Colts to cover 6 and maybe the Colts outright to win. I'd have to check to see that they're probably getting a pretty good set of odds for you. Josh Jacobs is an auto start for you in this game. Devontae Adams is an auto start for you in this game. Derek Carr, again, he's a back end QB1 type of situation there. Not a bad option. Darren Waller, there's been some conversations around his health, so definitely something to keep in mind as we keep going. He was a limited participant in his last outing. Hunter Renfrow was also a limited participant. Derek Carr was a full participant, though, so he should be good to go. On the other side, we have Deion Jackson, who did not participate. You have Jonathan Taylor, who was a limited participant. So if Jonathan Taylor is good to go, you're going to put him into your lineups, but you're going to put him in very tentatively because this Colts offense has not been very good. But again, I'm hoping that we see an invigorated team coming out. The linchpin of it, though, is Sam Ehlinger, who just has not been that great. But maybe we see a little bit kind of get pieced together for him as things get moved along here. And then outside of that, Alec Pierce, you could work him into lineups when Matt Ryan was checking down to him. I don't know if we're going to get that same type of production. We haven't kind of seen it as of late. I love Alec Pierce as a dynasty asset. In terms of redraft right now, I don't think you can really work him into a lineup. We already talked about Dallas and Green Bay, so we're going to move now to Arizona and the Los Angeles Rams. We just talked about Las Vegas. This is a game that I expect the Cardinals. You know what? I don't know what I expect because I expect the Cardinals to win it. But man, the Cardinals have been difficult to be confident in their play. And the over under here, another one, 41.5. The Rams are expected to score 21 points. I can't remember the last time I felt good about the Rams being projected to score 21 points. It was probably last season. That offensive line is very, very rough to watch. And Matt Stafford just ended up on in concussion protocol, which could make things even more difficult for the Rams in general. He did not participate in the latest practice. Keep an eye on that as we move forward. He needs to be able to clear protocols in order to play. That I don't think is going to affect Cooper Cup. It is going to affect him. Let me say that it's going to affect Cooper Cup, but I don't think it's going to make Cooper Cup unplayable. You're going to keep Cooper Cup in your lineup because he's Cooper Cup. If Matt Stafford can't go, man, it's a tough call of what we're going to get in terms of quarterback play. If Stafford can't go, again, I'm putting Cup in my lineup because it's Cooper Cup. But outside of that, I'm okay with not having anybody else in my lineup other than that. Higby has been Stafford's security blanket minus the last week when he got like one catch or one target that I think he didn't even bring in. Um, so yeah, Darrell Henderson, Cam Akers, I don't want to touch it. It's almost as bad as Kansas City, but Kansas City is thrown in a third running back. And Kansas City at least scores points and moves the ball down the field. The Rams are a much more sluggish offense. So I don't want to have to play Henderson again. Desperation calls for what you need to do. So if you need to flex him, I get it. But I don't want him in lineups unless I absolutely need him. Kyler Murray is essentially an auto start for you because of what he offers with his legs. And this is a game where he may need to scramble anytime you have Aaron Donald charging down on you. You got to make lightning quick decisions. And we might see Kyler Murray choosing to scramble a little bit more. DeAndre Hopkins let me down a little bit. I expected a little bit more volume out of him last week, but DeAndre Hopkins is the volume monster in this offense. I expect him to be an auto start for you. James Conner should be healthy and should be moving forward. I like him as an option moving forward. This week may be one that you temper your expectations for James Conner. But if I had to choose Connor or Henderson, I'm choosing Connor because I don't expect Benjamin to creep into any touches if Connor is fully healthy. Zach Ertz is another one who has been just a nice story in terms of the tight end position this week. So I don't mind going ahead and throwing him out there. And we'll move now to the Chargers because we're at almost an hour. We're way past calling this a rapid rundown at this point. But the Chargers traveling to San Francisco. San Fran is expected to win this game. San Fran is a 7-point favorite in this game, which is kind of interesting to see. But it's mostly, I would say, based on San Fran just being a strong team and the fact that Justin Herbert has almost no one to throw the ball to except for Austin Eckler. Yes, Josh Palmer is there. Keenan Allen didn't participate. He's projected for 12 points. I'm not buying it. But this is one spot where I'm not buying it. I'm not. I've been in this situation all season long where Keenan Allen is a hamstring. He's questionable, and I'm like, all right, well, let me put him as a starter, and then oh crap, it's the day of. Let me now switch him out because now he's out, or now I need to wait all the way until 3:00. And no, I'm done. He's out of my lineup. He's out of my lineup until he is healthy. I'm not buying it anymore, Mr. Keenan Allen. I will send you a disgruntled letter about my fantasy teams. I won't. Don't get too excited. But you have Herbert. You're probably going to roll him out there because he's Justin Herbert. He makes plays. You're going to roll out Austin Eckler. Same thing. He makes plays. And again, I don't mind throwing Joshua Palmer out there. I don't mind throwing Gerald Everett out there. I think that's a fine play. DeAndre Carter, if Allen can't play, they're gonna be throwing the ball around to some extent. It'll be a question of what we get out of the San Fran defense, which is usually a pretty decent unit. On the San Fran side, CMC, love them. Get him in your lineups. He's everything that CMC to be going to a Kyle Shanahan offense. Yeah, I don't think there's anything more to be said there. Get him in your lineup. Jimmy Garoppolo, streamable. Don't mind it, but not excited. Debo Samuel, you're going to get him into your lineups. He's looks like he's fully healthy. He's a full participant. He looks like he's fully healthy. You're going to get him into your lineups. Kittle has been disappointing this season. So it really depends on what you have as options there. But Kittle is probably one you're going to have as a tight end because you probably haven't been going out getting too many other tight ends. If you have Kittle, invested that draft capital in him. And Brandon Ayuk has been doing just fine as an option there. But other than that, you're probably not going to roll out anybody else. And then the Monday night game and a NFC East showdown. You have the Philadelphia Eagles at home welcoming the Commanders in. This is the biggest spread of the slate at 11 points. If you can't guess, for Philly's expected to win. You're playing Jalen Hurts, you're playing AJ Brown, you're playing Dallas Goedert, you're playing Miles Sanders. And then you could sprinkle in maybe like a Devonta Smith, maybe a Kenneth Gainwell, maybe. But I'm not. Miles Sanders has kind of established himself in this rushing attack. Yes, they sprinkle some other running backs in, but no more extent than any other situation. So I'm all in on Miles Sanders keeping that lead rolling and keeping that going. On the Washington side of the ball, you're playing McLaurin. And then you're probably flexing Antonio Gibson. We talked about this on the Tuesday night show. It's funny that it took them this long to figure out how to get Antonio Gibson the ball in a way that helps Antonio Gibson and a way that helps the Commanders. Really weird that it took this amount of time for that to happen. But I don't mind rolling out Antonio Gibson as a flex play here. Brian Robinson is kind of the slam the ball in between the tackles, cloud of dirt, and 2 yards. He doesn't impress me outside of that. So I'm not getting him worked into any lineups. Jahan Dotson looks like he's going to be back and healthy. So that's an interesting option there, but not against this Philly team that is shutting just about everything down. So I do not like Tyler Heineke in here. I'm starting McLaurin if I have him. I'm starting Curtis Samuel if I have him. I'm starting Antonio Gibson if I have him. And then outside of that, I'm not really playing anybody else. And if I have better options, I might be throwing those better options. Not might. If I have better options, I'm playing those better options because they're better options. That sounds totally redundant, but you're probably going to have some other options out there over McLaurin, over Samuel, over Gibson, where you're not going to feel like you have to get them into a lineup. That's what I'm trying to say there. All right, that does it. That's our show, ladies and gentlemen. Not rapid, but we got a ton of engagement out there, and I encourage that. Thank you to everybody that jumped in here, commented on the show. Appreciate all of you. Come back, do it again. I don't mind answering all of your questions. I think I got to all of them. If I didn't, please help me out. Actually, Nick, I'm sorry, I missed this one. I'm in trouble. Please pick 2. Foreman, Singletary, Wilson. Don't laugh. For me, it is Foreman and Singletary. If you didn't get that out of the show, Jeff Wilson is currently the backup, but moving forward, I do see that Wilson could be an option for you moving forward. And other than that, I think I hit all of them. If I didn't, hit me up on Twitter at FF the At Home Dad. Follow the show on Twitter at The Fantasy Facts. Give our sponsors a follow. Give them your sponsorship because it's a great time and they are underdog. They're up in the corner of the screen right up in there. Great time. Check them out. I'm not going to do the whole plug for them, but if you don't know, get on there, check it out. Use the promo code FAQS, that's FAQS. Get a 100% deposit match up to $100, and then make sure you get to our sponsors, Fantasy Data, the ones hosting the show for us, fantasydata.com. Check them out on Twitter at Fantasy Data NFL. They have other ones for other sports as well, but use the promo code FAQS, that's FAQS. Get yourself 20% off your subscription. And ladies and gentlemen, that does it. I need to get back to work, man. I'll catch you on the flip side.